Hi, I'm Alexis with the local Ambrosia, and today we'll be doing the ultimate comfort food, mac and cheese. Macaroni and cheese is one of those classic staples that can be switched up with all types of variations, switching out the pastas types, the cheese types, adding meat or veggies to it. But this recipe will really help get you started with mastering one basic simple recipe first. To get started, we'll go over to our large pan filled with water that will turn on high heat to get your pasta going. Throw a lid on it to help heat it up quicker. I like to add my salt at the end once the water's already started boiling. So we'll move over to our saucepan and get our roux going. So over medium-low heat, we'll get the pan warmed up and add our tablespoon of butter. And while that starts to melt, I'm going to get going our little bit unconditional ingredient, which is garlic. So we'll do 2 cloves of garlic, crushed with our garlic press. And if you don't have a garlic press, go out and get one. You essentially put it in there, throw your garlic, and it squeezes out of these little tiny holes. So you get all of that great garlic flavor and oil, and not necessarily have to chop it up or worry about getting a real consistently fine texture. And as always, feel free to amend this to whatever you like. If you like it really, really garlicky, add some more. If you don't really want the garlic, you have someone who's averse to it, don't be friends with them first, but go ahead and omit it if you'd like. Give that all a stir. At this step, we can go ahead and turn the heat up just a little bit to encourage the butter to melt quicker. But once we start adding up the other ingredients in, you're going to want to bring it back down to that low heat so you don't burn anything. Or when you add your milk, it doesn't stick to the bottom. As the butter continues to melt, I'm going to go ahead and salt and pepper now. I found that it's almost impossible, once you've already added the milk in, to get it quite salty enough. So salt soon, taste throughout, and season as you need. I'm going to do about 2 pinches of salt. And at least a little bit of pepper, but I like mine a little bit peppery. So go ahead and add as much as you like. Give it a stir to break up all that butter. We're going to start developing our roux. The roux is what really brings it all together and holds that sauce to stick on your pasta. The basic recipe is 1 tablespoon of butter, 1 tablespoon of flour, 1 cup of low-fat milk, and 1/2 pound of pasta. But as you can see, if you're looking to feed more, you want to feed a family of 4, say, go ahead and use the full pound of pasta and double the rest of it. So we'll go ahead and sprinkle in our flour. And at this point, I'm going to switch over to a whisk to make sure everything gets really incorporated. You're going to want to keep it cooking for a while until it starts to seize up and turn a great golden blonde color. You'll know at that point that the raw flour flavor will have been cooked out completely. At this point, if you feel like things are moving a little quick, go ahead and turn down the heat to about medium, and that'll let you really continue to cook the flour without burning the garlic. So once you get to the point where when you start to stir, it doesn't automatically cover the pan, you can go ahead and start to add your liquid. So obviously, if you use a higher fat milk, whole milk, or even half whole milk and half and half, the dish is going to be extremely rich and creamy, but I really think you can achieve the same consistency with just regular 2% milk, and you cut out some of the fat while you're at it. So while whisking, go ahead and add in your milk. I like to add mine a little bit at a time first to really make sure that all the lumps and bumps are out. And once you feel like that's incorporated, go ahead and add the rest. And from here, you're just going to let it reduce down to about a third. If you had to adjust the temperature at all, you want to make sure that you're right about medium on the flame. And keep an eye on it. Thankfully, we're using a heavy bottom sauced pan, so I don't think we have to worry too much about the milk burning on it. But in the event that you know that you're working with a pan that is notorious for burning things, keep an eye on it, give it a stir every once in a while to make sure it's all incorporated. We'll check on our water to see how it's coming along. We still have a bit of time. So if you had to adjust the temperature at all, you're going to want to crank it back up to high, medium high, until you start to see a little bit of a boil. Coming in and checking on it, giving it a stir every once in a while to make sure that nothing's burning on the bottom of your pan. Once you start to get a boil going, turn it down to medium, medium-low, and just keep an eye on it. You want it to reduce down to about a third. And while we wait for that, we can turn to our cheese. So we have about a half a cup of shredded extra sharp cheddar cheese. So what you're looking for is a real high intensity flavor, so you don't have to use as much of it. But the secret ingredient here is taking a half of a lemon and squeezing it on top of your shredded cheese, making sure to get all of those pesky seeds out. One more. And give it a toss with your fingers. The idea is that you're coating the cheese with a little bit of acid, and it's going to make for an extremely smooth and creamy sauce. You're not going to get any of that stringy, clumpy cheese. It's classically seen in fondue recipes. A lot of times I'll say you to coat it in white wine. Same idea. You're minimizing how stringy it's going to get and really increase the rich velvetyness of your sauce. So I see a few bubbles starting to form. So we'll just go in and give it a little stir. And you can start to feel some areas where the milk's starting to collect on the bottom. So you just want to work those out, make sure it's all up and moving. And at this point, while you're still trying to get it up to a boil, you can go ahead and taste it for seasoning. Pretty good. The garlic's still really strong, almost spicy. It'll mellow out a little bit as we continue to cook, but it's a great flavor profile. And you want to be aware not to add too much salt at this point. You're going to be adding cheese and another secret ingredient a little bit later, and that will add to the saltiness of the dish. You'll notice just before you start to hit that rolling boil, you'll start to see the surface of the milk almost start to just move and spread, and that's when you know you're getting close. The edges will start to bubble, and at that point, I say go ahead and give it a stir because you know things are getting hot, so you want to make sure you keep things moving. And just as suspected, you can start to see all the little bubbles start to go. So at this point, I'm going to turn it down just a little bit so it can maintain that, not get any higher. The general rule of thumb is to let your milk sauce reduce down until it coats the back of a wooden spoon. But I've always found that saying to be a little bit vague. How thick is that? So when in doubt, just let it keep reducing a little bit more. You'll notice that once it gets to the desired thickness, we're going to remove it from the heat and add the cheese. And while the cheese will start to thicken and seize things up a little bit, you're not going to get much thicker. As you stir it, you can see that it's starting to stick on the edge of the pan, and you know that you're on the right path to thickness. As it starts to cook down, you'll notice that a thin skin almost starts to form on the top of it, and that's always my cue to go in and break that up, because you don't want a thick skin on your nice soft sauce. All right, I hear our pot of boiling water going. So I'm going to go ahead and add in a generous amount of salt. Give it a stir. And throw in our pasta. So the traditional dish, macaroni and cheese, calls for macaroni. I happen to have fusilli on hand, so I'm just going to go ahead and use that. And that's one of the wonders of cooking, especially this dish, is you can just go ahead and use whatever you have. If you have blue cheese instead of cheddar cheese, try that. It's delicious and fun to play in the kitchen. So I'll dump these in. And give it a stir. And that'll take probably about 10 minutes to cook, but there's always the package directions also that you can follow. So back to our sauce. Things are starting to boil up, big thick bubbles, and you can see as I'm stirring it that you can tell it's thickening up. We're not quite there yet, but definitely on the road. A lot of recipes will call for a little bit of olive oil in the boiling water. I don't really see the point because water and oil don't mix. You're really losing a lot. You're not gaining anything from dumping the pasta through the olive oil. The olive oil is the first thing to pour off as you drain it. So I just skip the extra calories and the extra work altogether. A real key to a nice, evenly cooked sauce is making sure that your pan is directly over your flame. If you notice as you're stirring that there's one specific area that's more sticky than others, take a look and see where your pan is in relation to that flame, because you want it right over the middle. We'll give our pasta a stir to make sure that it's cooking evenly. And then go back to our sauce. So things are starting to really get vigorously boiling now. And when you start to stir, you can notice the difference in the way that it feels. It's not thin like milk anymore. It's almost frothy. And it's really a game of consistency here. It's not that you can just leave it on the stove for 10 minutes and it'll be perfect. You really need to know what you're looking for. And so once things start to get pretty thick, you can remove it from the heat and it will, upon cooling down, thicken up just a little bit more. But the worst case scenario is you have to add a little bit of milk or pasta water while you're tossing your pasta. But the worst thing that you can ever do, in my opinion, is a runny sauce. So it's been about 15 minutes since we first got this on the stove. And things are starting to get thick. So I think it's time for that old back of the wooden spoon trick. So give it a stir. And as you can tell, it definitely is coating that spoon. So I think we might be ready to pull it off the heat. So we'll turn it down and give it a second to cool down. You can also help by whisking it a little bit. Because we'll be adding in the cheese immediately with that little bit of acid, you want to be very careful to cool it down until you can probably stick your finger in there so that you still have enough heat to melt the cheese, but it's not too much that it's all going to seize up and curdle. Another trick that you can see is as you're stirring it pretty vigorously, you can almost catch glimpses of the bottom of the pan, and that's when you know your sauce is definitely thick enough. It's been about 3 minutes since we turned off the flame, whisking every once in a while to cool it down, and I think we're ready to add our cheese. So I'd add about half of it first and stir it with that wooden spoon until it's all incorporated. All right, we'll go ahead and add in our last little bit of cheese. Keep stirring it all in. All right, and as those last little nuggets of cheese start to melt, we'll go back to our pasta and see if it's about ready to be drained off. Perfectly al dente. Turn off the heat, being careful that your pan is pretty hot. Take it over and drain it off. Now, depending on the size of your pans, you can go ahead and use whichever one will fit both your sauce and the pasta. But before we add the pasta, our last secret ingredient is a little bit of mustard. So the mustard will add a nice tanginess to it, adding on that complexity of your extra sharp cheddar. Because think of a sharp cheddar, it's really strong, salty, almost tangy. And this starts to really enhance that to get away with not using quite as much cheese and also enhancing the color of it. When you think of mac and cheese, you think of that real orange looking cheese. So I like to use Dijon mustard because it's really sharp and potent, but go ahead and use yellowed mustard as well. And just one little scoop. Give it a stir. And at this point, I think I'll just add my noodles into our saucepan. Being as careful as possible not to lose any. And you can see how those noodles, those hot noodles, are really retaining a lot of that sauce. And we'll top it off with just our last little bit. One last stir and we'll serve it up. So I have a little surprise garnish, of course. And what I did is I took up a few slices of smoked prosciutto, just on a cookie sheet, and put them in the oven at 350 for about 10 minutes. Keeping an eye on it, depending on how long your oven takes to cook. But what you end up with are little prosciutto chips, essentially, that are nice and crunchy. So to serve, I love taking a huge scoop of our mac and cheese. And topping it with your prosciutto chips. And that's how Local Ambrosia does mac and cheese. We have a new website. Go check us out for the full-length, in-depth recipes at www.localambrosia.com. And from there, you can put in your request for whatever recipe you want to see done. Hope to see you next time. Bye.